Japanese rice bowl dishes and 5 plant-based tips that you can start using today. Japanese rice bowls are also known as donburi. They're one of the simplest and tastiest meals that you could ever make. Or are they? Yes, they are. You might think you need chicken or fish or beef, similar to something like oyakodon, yoshinoya, Tororo, soborodon. Those might be some of the more popular forms, but today we're talking about plant-based donburi. Donburi made with vegetables, plants, so that you can cook differently. So for all you plant-based people out there, this video is going to be proof for you, inspiration hopefully, maybe even a way for you to get started with a Japanese-style rice bowl, donburi, with some of my best tips for doing so. If we haven't met before, I'm Pat Tokuyama and I help people cook plant-based Japanese food. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up now or before you finish watching, but it really helps my channel grow and reach more people just like you. So, yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Thank you in advance. So before we get started, let me ask you, what is your favorite Japanese rice bowl or donburi? Let me know in the comments right now. And while you're doing that, in no particular order, I'll tell you about 5 of mine as well as some of my best tips for making them. First is going to be chirashizushi, which may or may not come in a bowl depending on the cookware or the dinnerware, plateware that you have at home. But not all sushi needs to be in a roll form or shape or include seafood. In fact, one of my favorite ways to eat chirashizushi, or literally scattered sushi, is with vegetables. So what's my tip here? Using brown rice. If you remember in one of the first few episodes that we did in this season, make sure to check out the link in the description below if you forgot or if you haven't seen it yet. So why brown rice? It's gonna add a little bit more flavor, texture, nutrition, and it's gonna make for a nice and filling meal as compared to white rice. You can actually even use wasabi or ginger, pickled ginger if you have it, for similar flavors and aromas to enjoy your chirashizushi. Check the link in the description for the recipe in my newest cookbook, Getting Started with Plant-Based Japanese Foods. So my second favorite Japanese rice bowl is going to be Ankake. Ankake is literally a dashi-based sauce that has been thickened with a starch like potato starch, katakuriko, kuzuko, which is arrowroot starch, and it's almost like gravy without any of the fat because you're using dashi. If you're doing a plant-based dashi, it's going to be something maybe kombu dashi or shiitake dashi, or a combination of the two, plus a little bit of sugar, plus or minus some soy sauce, and or other ingredients to help the flavor be extremely satisfyingly rich and delicious. I like gravy. Growing up, potatoes, mashed potatoes specifically, were one of my favorite foods to eat. And if you love potatoes as much as me and gravy as much as me, chances are you're gonna love Ankake. All you need to do is add a little bit of cooked vegetables, maybe some tofu or some mushrooms for a nice and delicious meal. So what's my tip? Using different starches for different consistencies. So arrowroot starch and potato starch and corn starch. Those are all gonna be slightly different in terms of the gelling factor, depending on how much liquid you're using versus the actual starch. Plus, you're going to vary the types of dashi that you're using and the shoyu or the soy sauce, or mensuyu, which is a noodle soup base, which can also be used to change things up in terms of the flavor profile. So get the recipe link in the description below. My third favorite Japanese rice bowl is kare. Kare is Japanese style curry, of course. And one of my favorite things to eat year-round. Who doesn't like curry, especially if it's homemade and made from scratch? It's easy to do and it tastes better than anything that comes in a box. At least that's my opinion. What is yours? Let me know in the comments below. So if you want to know my tip for a kare, it's going to be, as some of you who are more experienced in cooking plant-based foods and using different sources of plant protein, you may or may not be surprised that it's going to be chickpeas. Chickpeas are neutral in flavor and creamy in texture, and thus make for a very easy ingredient or substitute for chicken or beef, which is commonly added to Japanese curries, and it makes for a very filling meal as well. Try it next time and let me know how it goes and report back with a comment. So my fourth favorite Japanese rice bowl or donburi is going to be unanju. Unanju is traditionally made with unagi, which is a type of fish, even though it doesn't really look like a fish in terms of the shape. It actually is a fish. And given that unanju is traditionally made with unagi or eel, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. Plus, good quality unagi imported and raised in Japan tends to be pricey. Is it worth it? Absolutely. So if you're plant-based, you might be wondering what the next best thing would be, and that's going to be a combination of 3 ingredients: tofu, neba 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 nagaimo, and nori. Combining those ingredients together makes for a consistency and texture that is very similar to unagi, and you might be pleasantly surprised if you haven't tried it yet. So the 5th Japanese rice bowl that we're going to be talking about is going to be torodon. Tororo is the same ingredient. It's made with the same ingredient that we just talked about, neba 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 nagaimo. And I say neba neba because that's the word for like the sticky, slimy, stringy texture that both natto and tororo provide. And it's one of my favorite ways to enjoy a simple plant-based rice bowl. So usually when I'm eating this, I like to eat it with natto, which is fermented soybeans, as well as umeboshi, which is pickled plum, plus or minus a little bit of shoyu or soy sauce and toasted nori. And this is actually something that you can serve as a side dish or okazu, kind of like what we talked about in the previous video, or you can eat it as an entire meal. So some of my tips for you in terms of making this version of a Japanese rice bowl is to vary the ingredients. So obviously your base is going to be the nagaimo, tororo, as well as the natto and the umeboshi. So you can add things like kimchi, which is, the fermented cabbage mixture, the Korean style. There's also Japanese style if you want something a little bit more mild. You can use mentsuyu, which is the noodle soup base. You can use yuzu kosho if you want something a little bit spicy, as well as grated ginger, freshly grated wasabi, and freshly chopped onions, and even shiso. So what's your favorite variation so far? We talked about 5 of my favorites, and if you haven't had any of these before, which one would you try first? The first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, or the 5th one? Let me know in the comments with a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 right now. And if you haven't left me a thumbs up yet, I'd be curious why. Totally cool though if you haven't. If you have any feedback for me, let me know in a comment below right now. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. And then in the next episode, we're going to be talking about doreshingu, Japanese style dressing for Japanese style salads. And I think you're going to be in for a treat, especially if you love salads as much as I do. Or if you don't have any feedback for me, feel free to tap that thumbs up right now and let me know how it goes. If you want to see more plant-based Japanese cooking videos similar to this one today, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Kyotsukete ne. Dun 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 neba 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 nagaimo. Kini natta? Curious? Link in the description.